Good morning. I'll give everyone a few minutes to sit down and settle in, but just to let you know, we have started recording. Good morning. Welcome to the CRTPO Technical Coordinating Committee. This is Thursday, October 5th, and the time is 10:01. We'll go around the table and have TCC members introduce themselves, starting with Tracy.
This area. Heather Maloney, Town of Huntersville.
Aaron Tucker, Town of Cornelius.
Bjorn Hansen, Union County.
Andrew Ventresca, Town of Troutman.
Curtis Bridges, CRTPO staff.
Liz Babson, City of Charlotte.
Dan Lever, Charlotte General Services.
Irene Ivy, Mecklenburg County Public Health.
Anil Panikkar, NCDOT Division 12.
Alex Mundy, Bicycle Focus Area.
Andrew Golden, Town of Davidson.
Megan Green, Mecklenburg County Air Quality.
Brian Horton, Cats.
Sean Epperson, NCDOT Division 10.
Dana Stujanki, Town of Matthews.
Thank you. And before we introduce others in the room, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Cook to make a couple of announcements.
Thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to make an announcement about our two newest employees. I think some of you have heard this before, maybe at the a recent transportation staff meeting. But they're both in now, right? Oh, yeah, Paul and Will are both here. First, I want to introduce Will Snyder. Will joined us on the 11th of September. He is filling the vacant associate planner position, and he comes to us from TransPro Consulting and just recently got his master's degree from Ball State University. As his duties will be providing support across the entire program that we're responsible for, and we'll be taking advantage of his graphic skills and tech skills, as well as I think we've already done that, as a matter of fact. So during his brief time here. Next is Paul Benton. Paul joined us a week after Will on the 18th of September. He is filling the vacant engineer position, Augustine's former position. Paul comes from us from CDOT, where he was the senior engineer in the planning and design division. Paul has his PE And his duties will be a lot of Augustine's former duties, of course, with the traffic count program, the alignment evaluation program, et cetera. And of course, the biggest responsibility ultimately, I'm happy to report, will be the Beyond 77 project manager duties. I won't dump that on him right away. It'll be a gradual one, but hopefully a little less or a little bit less gradual than need be. So we're very happy to have both of them join us and fill out the team finally after some lengthy absences. And Liz, I just want to make one other personnel related announcement. I just wanted to note that Jennifer was recently promoted to project coordinator. In recognition of the outstanding job she has done with the discretionary grants program. I think most of you in the room are familiar with the program, have maybe had projects, and you work with Jennifer quite a bit. And so you know what a professional she is and what she has done for that program since she joined us in 2020, like a week before COVID started. So I just wanted to make that announcement as well. So thanks for the time.
Thank you. And congratulations and welcome. All right, now we'll go out to our audience and do introductions real quickly. Neil, we'll start with you.
Neil Burke, CRTPO.
CRTPO.
Loretta Baird,
Brian Powers.
I am Thomas with Office of Crime and Policy Intervention.
Luke Lowry, Central Regional Council. Will Snyder, CRTPO. Sean Williams, NCDOT, fitting Phoenix over.
Stephanie Stafford, CRTPO. Johnson, CRTPO. CRTPO.
All right, thank you. Moving into our agenda. May I have a motion to adopt today's agenda? And a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Next, we have the adoption of today's consent agenda. So we have the approval of the September 7th, 2023 TCC minutes, the 2024-2033 TIP amendments, and the Metropolitan Planning Area Boundary adoption. May I have a motion for that action? And a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. We have no items for business, but we do have 5 information reports for today. So first, we're going to hear from Andy Grimsky, and he's going to present information to us on functional classification revision requests.
Good morning. As Liz mentioned, I'm going to talk about 2 changes we'd like to make to the functional classification map and also adding to the federal aid system map. These 2 projects are in the southwest area of the city, in the Steel Creek area. And the 2 projects that mentioned, Sandy Porter Road. First of all, Brown Greer Arrowwood. This would connect an existing federal aid corridor from 485 to Steel Creek, as well as Sandy Porter from Shopton Road down to South Tryon or NC 49. Brown Greer, we're proposing changing from a loco to a major collector. They have over 22,000 ADT as of 2019. Sandy Porter Road, we're proposing changing from a loco to a minor collector, which has a little more, almost 13,000 ADT as of 2019. And the reason for the change is this area has developed quite a bit. We have 3 schools right here. We have a large Berwick development, Whitehall office development, Airsley mixed use. So there's a lot of stuff. And this is kind of was on the fringe of the city. It's developed, so we think it should be streets that are classified at the federal functional classification level. So next steps after today, I'll be taking this to the CARPO board for information at their October meeting. I'll bring it back to TCC and the board for action in November. And then we'll submit to NCDOT for their final review, which then goes to federal highway Loretta for her final review. So any questions?
Any questions for Andy on this? All right. You got off easy.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Megan. No, whoop, let me put my glasses on. Thank you, Reagan Murphy. And she's going to provide us an update on Coordinate, our future community viz briefing and status update. Thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you so much for having me. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Reagan Murphy. I'm a regional planner with Central Ina Regional Council. And I'm one of the staff leading the Coordinate Our Future project, which some of you may have heard of before as the Community Viz Model Update. So this feeds directly into the MTP development process for CRTPO and the travel demand model update. So wanted to give y'all a brief snapshot of where we've been so far, the history and kind of context behind Coordinate Our Future, and a status update on the data we've developed so far and what we've been doing kind of behind the scenes at Central Ina, and then forecast some upcoming activities and ways that you all can be involved in the process. So Coordinate Our Future really, I think, comes down to the fact that we can't predict the future, but Coordinate Our Future is all about better preparing for it, right? And that same principle really guides the travel demand model process. It's all about thinking about where growth is going to go, and then assessing how we can, upgrade our infrastructure and make the adjustments that we need to support that growth and maintain our quality of life and the quality of our communities across the region. And so, like I mentioned, this process really kind of feeds into the travel demand model update process. So just a quick reminder, I think, for most of you, but this is the map of our travel demand model area for the Metrolina region. In North Carolina, we use travel demand models to predict the impacts of growth on our transportation network. And for Charlotte, our transportation demand model is housed at CDOT and is managed by Martin and Alex, and they're a really great team. So we work closely with them to make sure everything we do is coordinated with what they need. Our model includes the CRTPO jurisdiction as well as the Rocky River RPO jurisdiction. So Stanley and Anson and the other portion of Union County that's not included in CRTPO's jurisdiction, as well as GCL MPO or Gaston Cleveland Lincoln Metropolitan Planning Association to the west. Cabarrus Rowan Metropolitan Planning Organization to the northeast, and then RFATS down in the Rock Hill Fort Mill area as well. So really, I think, excuse me, there we go. One element we found that's really important as we do this travel demand model update process is we really want to be syncing transportation and land use. And I know you all are transportation planners or, local planners in this room, so you understand how important that connection is. And for each MTP development process where, we're evaluating and prioritizing new projects, we really need accurate data about where growth is going and how it's occurring to make effective decisions about transportation. And so big lead up to what actually is Coordinate Our Future. Really think of this work as phase one of the MTP development process. And then the model update, the travel demand model, is kind of phase two. So, this first phase is when we determine where that growth is coming and how much at the horizon year level and at the TAZ level, before the travel demand model then tells us what impacts we can anticipate to the transportation network. And our specific goal is to come out of our process for Coordinate Our Future in June 2024 with population and employment forecasts at the traffic analysis zone level for the MTP horizon years. And to do that, we use a software program called Community Viz. So if you've heard of it referred to as the Community Viz process before, that's why. How we do it, we use a coordinated and region-wide process that's very collaborative to put together the data sets that we need to anticipate those growth impacts. As we all know, transportation doesn't stop at jurisdictional boundaries. And so when we think about how big the region is that's being fed into the travel demand model, it's really critical to have coordinated inputs across that region that have been developed in a consistent and a defensible way. And how we do it, I'll talk a little bit more about this in just a second, but we lean on not only the transportation planning organization staff, but also local planners and GIS professionals across the region to help us make sure we're getting that kind of ground truthed, up to the minute information about where and how growth and development are occurring in our region. So who's participating in Coordinate Our Future? Of the folks who are participating in the travel demand model, specifically these 3 transportation planning organizations are participating in this regionally coordinated process for Coordinate Our Future. So GCL MPO, CRTPO, of course, and then Rocky River Rural Planning Organization to the east. And we're really excited to have these 3 groups coordinating on these inputs. And I just want to talk a little bit and underscore the benefits of that coordinated regional approach. This is considered a best practice by NCDOT and FHWA. The fact that we leverage scenario planning in our community viz effort is considered kind of that state-of-the-art practice for predicting growth allocations for the MTP development process. And like I mentioned, it's really important to have those defensible and credible inputs across the region to ground and defend our decision-making if we need to. It's also really reflective of local realities. The fact that we incorporate local land use and adopted land use policy from each of the jurisdictions within our planning area means that we are really taking into consideration local preferences and attitudes about growth instead of just taking a blanket approach to predicting land use for the region. So that's something that really sets, I think, this process and our model in the greater Charlotte region apart. So I know the text on the screen is really small. Really what I want to get at here is just contextualizing Coordinate Our Future, which you can see is really towards the beginning of the process. We're kind of front loaded, like I mentioned, in the MTP development process. So if you know, the start of this timeline is February 2023, and the end is our MTPs are put together, adopted, ready to kind of go out into the world. We are really, like I mentioned, that kind of step 1 before the travel demand model assesses where those impacts are going to be made to the travel or the transportation network. And Coordinate Our Future really boils down into these 4 buckets. I won't read everything on this slide, but really what you need to know is the data development piece. That's really what we take care of at Centralina alongside our consultant City Explained, who runs the community viz model for us. So we're spending a lot of our time gathering data and then doing local engagement to kind of ground truth that data. So regional engagement, we do a lot of outreach with local communities and local planners throughout this process. We also have a region-wide steering committee, which we have quite a bit of representation from CRTPO's jurisdiction on that committee. And we'll do some more engagement later this fall that I'll talk about a bit later. The community viz model, of course, is a big part of this process. We update it each cycle to be reflective of the new realities and the new growth preferences that we find through our engagement. And finally, you know, we end this project hopefully with several deliverables that are very valuable to all of you. All of the data that we collect is then available in the kind of cleaned up processed format that we put it through to get it ready for the community viz model. So you're looking at receiving, you know, a parcel by parcel level data set for the entire region that looks at where growth can go, where growth cannot go, development statuses across the region, and so on. We also offer a lot of information about our methodology just for public access so that y'all can easily access that. And we also, with our consultant, provide training to any staff at the local level who are interested in learning about how to use community viz. So if y'all are interested in potentially exploring that as an opportunity to learn, or use scenario planning in some of your local efforts, that's a great option as well. So our project schedule across those 4 buckets looks like this. We just had our second, steering committee meeting last Thursday, so a week ago today. And as you can see, we've really been heavily involved so far in the data development process and really starting to kick into gear on regional engagement. And I wanted to just give y'all a snapshot too of who's involved across this project. So like I mentioned, the project team on our end, Central Carolina Regional Council, we're also collaborating with Catawba Regional Council of Governments on the South Carolina side, and City Explained. We're really leading the charge behind the scenes to develop that data. We're in the weeds, kind of putting those pieces together. We really look to the steering committee as our kind of panel, our sounding board, full of regional perspectives to help us confirm that we're on the right track and weigh in on certain decisions about how we use the model or how we design the model when that comes up and as that becomes necessary. But then local staff, so all of you who sit on the TCC and your peers across the CRTPO region, really want to emphasize y'all have the opportunity to play a really significant role in this process as well, through providing relevant local data and up-to-date local data, and then also providing insights for all of us as we create our data sets, confirming that they reflect the realities that you're seeing on the ground. So for CRTPO specifically, just wanted to shout out some of your steering committee members in particular. So Curtis is really leading the charge. Travis, of course, is not currently active on the steering committee, of course, but he is a member. Martin and Alex are members of our steering committee. And then if y'all are familiar with Evan Lowry over in Planning and GIS, as well as Kathy Cornett in the Planning Department, they are active members of our steering committee as well. So if you have any questions about this process as we continue, you can of course reach out to Central Carolina, but you can also reach out to some of the in-house expertise that you have easily accessible to you through CRTPO. So with all that, I'll dive into a bit of a progress update for our different data sets that we produce. So some of you may have received a data request from myself or my colleague Luke over the last couple months, and may be wondering, what the heck we did with that information. So I'm about to let you know. We are responsible through this process for developing 4 data sets as inputs to the community viz model. And those are carrying capacity, development status, land suitability, and community types. So I'll talk just very briefly about what each of those is designed to do and where we are in the process for each of them. For carrying capacity, that's really designed to identify where growth will not occur, right? So we know that future housing development is not going to end up in the middle of Lake Norman. So we want to make sure any parcels that are majority water, for example, don't end up coded as being available for development. It seems silly, but it is a really important step to making sure our model is accurate. So we look at conservation areas, existing rights of way, of course, like I said, water bodies. And then we also collect from local governments any areas where stream buffers might be unique at the local or jurisdictional level. I'm really happy to share that we've actually collected and received all the data we need from local governments for this layer or this data set. So these are 2 different versions of the carrying capacity map. The one on the left has the right-of-way layer turned on, but you can see it really, it's everywhere because we have a lot of right-of-way within the project area. So on the right is just a little bit of a better representation of some of the other protected areas across the region. But so we're in the process of delivering that data set to our community viz consultant. The next data set is land suitability. And this really looks at how attractive or how magnetic a given parcel is for specific types of development and growth. And that magnetism may be a push away from certain types of areas, or it may be a pull, right? So for example, watershed protection and flood hazard areas, you're still able to develop, but that may be a push away for higher density development. Whereas, interchanges, access to transit infrastructure, access to water and sewer, we know are major pulls and major drivers for development. So we've been coordinating with the TPOs to receive several of these layers. Shout out to Curtis and the team at CRTPO. We have received all of the transportation layers from y'all. We do have just a bit more coordination to do with the CATS team, and shout out to Brian for that. We'll be finalizing, by horizon year, how we're going to move forward with the transit layers. But just a little bit more work to do on that, and then these layers will be finalized. We also are following up with folks at the local level to see if we can receive as much water and sewer service area information as we can. We know that's kind of a sensitive and protected class of data for very good reasons. So we're just doing some additional follow-up to round out that data set. For development status, this one is really exciting and really, I think, the biggest lift or one of the biggest lifts that Centralina takes on. We, for development status, actually code at the parcel by parcel level across the entire jurisdiction of our project area, the current extent of development on a parcel. So we assign every single parcel across the region one of 8 development statuses, whether fully developed, partially developed, water, that's another development status. And so we really look to, we use aerial imagery to do that. We have up-to-date 2023 aerial imagery for the entire region, with the exception of Anson County and portions of Stanley County. So we'll be getting those later this fall in November, I believe, from NC1 map. But everyone else, we have 2023 aerial imagery that we're using to code the parcels based on their development status. We're also looking at inventories of farmland and protected open space to ensure that those are reflected accurately and not just marked as, vacant or undeveloped land, but really reflective of their true development status. And we expect to finalize that draft regional data set by January 2024, but I really want to underscore the importance of y'all's involvement at that time and giving feedback, because we recognize, right, that aerial imagery doesn't necessarily reflect everything that's happening on the ground. It can sometimes be easy to misinterpret. So we just forecasting for all of you, that's going to be an opportunity that you all have to provide some feedback on the data that we're developing to make sure it reflects the growth trends and the realities that you're seeing in your communities. And then finally, community types. So this is where land use comes into it. We incorporate for the community types also at the parcel level for the entire region, assignments based on locally adopted future land use plans and policies. So we really, really lean on comprehensive plans and future land use plans, and also the future land use maps that are embedded in those plans across the region. This is a really exciting data set. While we've always included this in our data for Coordinate Our Future, this is the first time, because of the General Assembly updates to Chapter 160D in the land use regulations that now require folks to have a land use plan adopted if they want to enforce local zoning. The result of that is, I think, almost 80% of our region's population is now living within a jurisdiction that has a locally adopted future land use policy. And that's a much higher number than has been the case in the past. That's really, really exciting for us, because it means we really are getting at that local attitude toward growth, and we're being able to better incorporate the priorities and the visions that each of our local communities has into this planning and decision-making process. So Centralina staff is doing quite a bit of work behind the scenes on this right now to develop what we call crosswalks between the local future land use visions and our regional community types. So at the regional level, we have 25 different community types ranging from residential to open space to industrial to commercial and many others. But to capture the breadth and depth of land use types that we see across the region, from uptown Charlotte all the way out to Anson County. We know that not every local jurisdiction has those exact same 25 community types. In fact, I don't think any of them have the exact same list in their land use plans. So what we do is we map using a matrix the local land use types or land use categories that are included in the land use plans to the regional community types. So we, again, take a first stab at that, kind of behind the scenes. But we will actually be coming to you all later this fall with an opportunity to review those matrices and review those assignments and give us feedback to make sure that those are reflective of your intentions for each of those land use categories that are in your adopted land use plans. So kind of segued into that. Like I said, this fall, we're really focused on data development, of course, especially those two major data sets, the development status and community types, and really moving now into regional engagement. We'll have several phases of this kind of throughout the process. So as you can see, there's another phase of engagement that will start early next year. And that's where we'll come back to y'all with the final data sets for review. But this fall, like I mentioned, we're really looking for feedback on the community types and some of our draft data around development status. We're going to be leading 2 virtual regional information sessions. So those are open to planners across the region, any jurisdictions that are participating in Coordinate Our Future. And so those are published live. Registration is live on Centralina's website and at the link at the bottom of this screen. That's where we'll be sharing out more information about where you can access the community type matrix for your community. So how you can access and download that, and then logistics for giving that feedback, as well as more of an overview of what those 25 community types are. So a little bit of education, a little bit of logistics. And then Centralina will be offering office hours to kind of help with that process over the following weeks. We're looking for feedback from you all by Wednesday, November 15th. So a bit of a quick turnaround, but like I said, more to come in those regional info sessions. So we would love to see as many of y'all and your peers across the CRTPO region attend those sessions as possible. And we'll also post recordings that are easily accessible on Centralina's website. The other key thing that we are working on this fall is surveying the development community. That kind of factors into our land suitability layer. We really look each cycle when we update this data to understand what are the factors that are influencing development decisions across the region, and what's the extent to which those factors are influencing decisions, right? So how significant is it that a parcel is located in a watershed, for example? Is it a very, very negative influence? Is it a slightly negative influence? So we've developed a virtual survey. We've officially, it'll be, I think, officially launched either at the end of this week or very early next week. And we'll give a little over a month to collect responses. We also have some print and digital collateral available, some marketing materials to help promote the survey. And so what we are asking from folks at the local level is for those of you who do interact with developers in the course of your daily activities, or if you have contact lists of developers who you're able to share the survey with, we would really, really appreciate that support in getting the word out to the development community so that we can have as representative of a sample as possible for folks who are doing development across our region. And we're trying to keep the deadlines the same. So November 15th is the only deadline y'all need to have in the back of your minds for this part of the process. So with that, that's, I think, everything I have to share. Last couple of reminders, data development. If you get an email from Luke or myself, definitely, reach back out to us and let us know, if we're looking for water sewer data, for example, who we need to reach out to. We'd love to see as many of y'all as possible at those regional info sessions at the end of the month. And any assistance you can provide in promoting that development community survey is much appreciated. Any questions? No, that was a lot of information.
I have a question either for Carpo or Centralina staff regarding the schedule for this group being asked to adopt the baseline and projection county level totals. Is that a November decision?
The plan for that has been a November information and action by TCC and then on to the board and also in November.
Okay, is that that seems like a lot to deliberate at one meeting, because these numbers are pretty important. Is it possible to do an information in November and then action in December, like we do with most topics?
It is a tight timeline. We'd have to probably discuss it some more with the model team staff and figure out if that's something that's possible. It's what's creating that crunch is the need for the model numbers to be produced for RFATs. Their MTP schedule is about a year ahead of ours, so there's some pressure on the back end there. But we'd have to discuss that with the model team and figure out if that's something that's even possible. Yeah, Martin, did you?
Gas in Cleveland, Lincoln is going to do their approval in December, and then I'll have a November meeting, so I think that's probably gonna be okay to do it. Probably justified to. It's a lot of information.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear Martin. So can someone repeat on the microphone what Martin said?
Yeah, Martin said the gas in Cleveland Lincoln is, they do not have a meeting in December with their board, so they have pushed. No, I'm sorry, November. So they will meet in December with their board. So it may be possible for us to do the same. Have information in November, and then action in December for both TCC and the MPO.
Yeah, I agree with Bjorn. I would like to have more time to look at that. It's a lot for staff to actually, ingest.
It is.
So, and then to explain to our elected officials.
Any more discussion or questions? And then Bob and team, might I suggest, I think you guys have weekly meetings. So that's probably another opportunity to continue to get information out and share it with folks in advance. Okay.
I have a question.
It is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Alex.
I have two questions, actually.
Hey.
This is my, I don't know, fifth time hearing you do this
I know.
presentation, Reagan.
Alex has seen me give this presentation 4 times, I think, in the last month.
I've had a question every time, so clearly I have a lot to learn. My first question is in regard to parking. I'm curious to know, and this may be a question more for the modeling team than you, but how Community Viz and the model treats parking. It's a bit of a limited land use. So yeah, give you a chance to respond.
Certainly. Yes, on our end, for the Community Viz model, I think that's mostly represented in our community type layer. And so each of those 25 community types has, assumptions around the amount of parking that's available, and the prevalence of that, as well as, for example, for residential units, like the number of dwelling units per acre. So we have some averages that we build into those land use categories and those assumptions. I don't know, though, that those actually carry into the travel demand model. And so they are reflected, I think, in some of our assumptions around land use, but I would look to maybe Martin or Alex to talk a little more about how that's reflected in the travel demand model. Not to put y'all on the spot, but.
So right now, parking is only affected in the CBD, and it's for mode choice. So it's cost of travel, value of travel time, cost. It goes into mode choice. And we're currently in our current model, we're doing a model update. It might change, but currently it's only affected in the CBD.
Okay, I was just curious because I know that some communities have been investigating like the elimination of minimum parking standards, and things like that. So I was wondering if that was either reflected in Community Viz's model in terms of, an assumption that fewer car trips may be made to certain nodes or mobility hubs or something like that. And two, about how, there's a lot of questions and thoughts about parking, but I was just curious about that. I don't think you need to respond to that. I was just curious. My second question is, you mentioned talking about future land use plans as part of the model. I'm curious to know, a lot of communities here and across the state have, different, transportation plans of different types. And they may be a bicycle plan, it may be a pedestrian plan. Many of them are funded by us. which is why I'm asking. So I'm curious to know if those, those plans for future build out of, bike or pedestrian infrastructure is also used in the model or the community biz, excuse me.
Right. For our model, to the extent that they're reflected in the future land use plans, which ideally they are, ideally those plans speak to each other. They are incorporated, but we don't look beyond the adopted future land use policy. So for example, if a community puts together, a bike ped plan or a plan that's focused on mobility and indicates, okay, certain areas need to be transit oriented development. And then they have a category in their land use plan that reflects that, that shows, okay, we want transit oriented development or bike friendly development. They've got specific categories that indicate that. We do have some categories at the regional level that those can map to. For example, we have a transit activity center category and a walkable neighborhood or a walkable town center category, but that's the extent to which those would be reflected. So it's kind of on the local jurisdictions to make sure those are incorporated into their future land use plans to the extent possible. The infrastructure itself is, I think, not built in until the travel demand model. I know that, it's not reflected in our model.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Any more questions? Or discussion? All right, thank you.
So thank y'all so much.
Okay, next, we're going to hear an update on Beyond 77 mobilization from Kendall and Brian Powers with RSNH.
Good morning, everyone. I am Kendall Clan from CRTPO, and with me is Brian Powers from RSNH. I will be providing the update on the Beyond 77 mobilization phase, and Brian will be talking about the alternative funding. First, I'll give a brief background on the Beyond 77 study, the outputs from that study, then I will dive into the mobilization phase, recent developments, then I will pass it over to Brian. The Beyond 77 study took place from September 2019 to January 2022, and it involved multiple jurisdictions, agencies, DOTs, and MPOs. The goal of the study was to find innovative ideas and to generate comprehensive recommendations with an immediate to long-term vision in mind. The CRTPO board adopted this study in January of 2022. Lastly, the study did not look at Interstate 77, only the areas around it. These are the four major outputs that came from the study. First, the SUIT application, also known as the Strategic Users Implementation Tool. This is an online application that houses the 286 recommendations that came from the study. Next, the FAST application, also known as the Funding Alternative Strategies Tool. This is also an online application intended to display short to medium-term funding alternatives across the various counties in the Charlotte metro area. Third, the marketing plan. The purpose of the marketing plan was to provide awareness, understanding, and to get buy-in from all the parties needed to implement the recommendations. And lastly, we launched the Beyond 77 website. We are now in the process of updating the website and the first two applications. Here is a timeline of the mobilization phase. This phase began after the adoption of the study in January 2022. We assembled a task force in May of 2022. The marketing plan was put into motion in the summer of 2022 and is still ongoing. And lastly, we had last month we held implementer meetings, which were a byproduct of the task force. And lastly, the coalition, which will be what we use to close this phase and begin the next chapter of Beyond 77. We established a task force to guide us through the mobilization phase. From May 2022 to this past August, we held 8 task force meetings and we accomplished the 4 core goals we were aiming for. First, the review and approval of the marketing plan. Second, coordination with other major initiatives such as Connect Beyond. Third, the review of the short list of recommendations. And lastly, the analysis of the alternative funding ideas identified in the Beyond 77 study. Initially, this was called the implementation stage, but due to task force input, we switched to the mobilization phase. Lastly, the task force helped us recruit the attendees needed for our implementer meetings. The purpose of the implementer meetings was to get thoughts and opinions on the recommendations identified by our task force and on our alternative funding mechanisms. From these meetings, we saw the potential in developing the Beyond 77 Coalition. The coalition aims to formally form a partnership between our local jurisdictions and our partner organizations to successfully implement Beyond 77 recommendations. For the past few weeks, staff has been meeting internally with the goal of reducing the number of recommendations. Reason for this is it has been some time since these recommendations were first created, and some of them are simply no longer relevant. In meeting with our peer organizations such as Central Line and CDOT, we have seen similar recommendations with the same intent/structure, and we believe they are better suited to implement those recommendations as opposed to us. So in the upcoming months, we will be back to request approval to remove recommendations from the Beyond 77 initiative. Also, 286 sounds like a nice number to have if it's millions of dollars in your bank account and not for a study of this size. I will now pass it over to Brian to talk about alternative funding.
Morning, everyone. As Kendall said, I'm Brian Powers with RSNH, and we've been assisting with a related effort as it's related to alternative funding. So moving through this, just a quick agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the background of what our current effort is, an overview of some of the alternatives that are actually being carried forward through that Beyond 77 study and into our analysis today. A little bit of a feedback review. Many of the meetings that Kendall just mentioned, we've actually been participating in, garnering feedback and working with those groups. And then a quick tutorial on the FAST application that he mentioned, just to run through. Through our conversations, we've realized that there is an unfamiliarity in many cases with the tool and how best to use it. So we like to push this one at the end just as a FYI for everyone. And then we'll talk briefly about next steps. So jumping into the background, just talking about what our effort is and what we're doing. So the main part of our effort is to support the task force and help their familiarity with the understanding of alternative funding. Alternative funding is one of these terms that is becoming increasingly popular or unpopular in some cases, but it's coming around and it's a nationwide discussion, and it's been local for many years, and we're continuing that discussion. So as part of this effort, we wanted to work through and identify 2 to 3 of the alternative funding methods that were identified as part of the Beyond 77 to continue research on. And I will give a spoiler that as we've gone through our task force meetings and our implementer meetings, the general consensus is that a working task force or coalition dedicated to the idea of alternative funding may be the preferred way to move forward. And then again, related to this FAST application that is online, we are actually developing an instruction manual to help users work through that. So one of the big things we wanted to highlight just straight out of the gate is that amongst those, I believe it was 286 strategies and solutions that came forward, PR4 is most related to our efforts today, the regional strategy for funding alternatives. And as you can see, the task force actually ranked this as a tie in first place. So it is very important to the region and the members of the task force to continue this discussion. So continuing on with some background, just a general outline of rough numbers of where transportation funding generally comes from. You know, the motor fuels tax, DMV fees, and the highway use tax. And then we look a little bit more local if we're thinking about the MTP process. You know, previously $3.9 billion sounds like tons of money, but at the end of the day, it's still needed a fiscally constrained list because we had more projects than there were funds to realistically accomplish that goal, which continues this discussion of, are there other funding alternatives that we can pursue to help increase that number and increase the number of projects in our communities? So one of the things I want to highlight is that this is a process that can't be done in a vacuum. I mentioned it's a conversation that's been happening across the nation. It's been happening very locally as well. So we wanted to highlight just a handful of efforts that have at least touched on this in some capacity or are currently touching on this. We wanted to make sure that not only were we aware of what was being said, but the progress of those initiatives. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that's kind of where we are. So as I mentioned, we are bringing forward 6 alternatives that were identified as part of the Beyond 77 plan as the most feasible for the region. And we're continuing the discussions to make sure that that remains to be true. So jumping in, we wanted to show what those 6 are. So if you look at our graph here, on the left-hand side, we've roughly grouped them into 3 categories: sales, property, and registration. There's sales tax, motor fuel sales tax, excuse me, motor vehicle sales tax, property taxes, a specific tax for vehicle property, and then vehicle registration fees. And then the second column in, or excuse me, third column in is the rough numbers of where they sit today. So just to highlight the ones that have been carried forward through our task force conversations and presentations, in general, the property section was deemed least feasible for the region or least desirable to continue the conversations moving forward. This is not to say that it is not viable or possible in many areas, but through our conversations as related to this, they were decided to be pushed into the background. So that leaves us with our various sales taxes and registration fee. So jumping in, giving a little bit of information on each one. The next 4 slides are going to be very similar. We're going to go down our graph and talk about each one. I won't read every single bullet because I won't do that to you, but I will, as I'm on these, if there are questions, feel free. I'm more than happy to answer live as well. What I will lead with, and it's a word that I probably will use multiple times, each one of these has a great deal of nuance in how they can be enacted and whether or not it's possible to be enacted under current legislation, or if something would need to happen at the statewide level to then make that a viable option. So, you know, if you were to say sales tax, the option for sales tax does exist to a certain capacity, but if it were, we'll use odd numbers, a 10% sales tax, that is not legislatively allowed currently. And therefore that would be that nuance which would kick into different conversations. So that's my attempt to head off some of the deep questions that we might get, but I'm happy to field them as they come forward. So jumping back to the slide and the format that will be on the next 4, the key considerations, you know, some of the features of these that can be discussed at a really high level, you know, as it relates to each and every one. Then our next big bullet is the example from the FAST app. So referencing back to this tool that is available online, you're actually able to go in and filter these options and determine what the potential benefit for the region might be. So this is looking at the entirety of the 3 counties that are in the excuse me, the MPO. If we were to assume a 1% sales tax, it would be roughly $18 billion in revenue that is possible in that 30-year period that I've identified there, 2025 to 2055. Then we have implementation, and this is the general steps which would have to be achieved in order to modify or make these possible. So this will change and is largely will require legislative action depending upon the scale of the changes that are provided. And then the ability to manage locally. As we've gone through this process, one of the main points that has come up in many times is whether or not there exists the legislative ability or a standing ability that this can be used directly by the municipalities, the local agencies, and things of that nature. The answer is it will vary. But for example, in this case, if we were to talk about a 0.5%, then yes, usually you would be able to assign that at a local level. So jumping to our next one, as I mentioned, I won't read through each one, but the first one is always the longest. I do like to hit on what the potential benefits of them are, because they are usually quite large numbers. You know, we're talking typically in the billions of dollars, which is substantial, but again, roadway and transportation and bicycle and pedestrian projects, they are all very expensive when we're talking about large timeframes. So in this example, if the fuel sales tax was modified, that instead of it was a flat rate per gallon, it was based on a percentage of price. The price for this range that was developed was $2.50 a gallon, because it was done in 2020, I think, the values. So this estimates right about $5 billion, a pretty substantial sum of money. And then again, this is one of those items that is not able to be managed at the local level at this stage. You know, it's very much managed at the statewide level and then doled out. Jumping down, motor vehicle sales tax. So very similar process to regular sales tax, except motor vehicle sales are capped at the highway use tax, which is 3%. So suggesting that a potential modification in our region, we could come up with something upwards of 16.5 billion in that range. And then if this were to be directly managed locally, it would require some action. So then jumping into the vehicle registration fee, this is effectively every year that you go and register your vehicles. This is the conversation of if there is a set fee or a percentage fee. This is something that is enacted in certain areas. For example, Charlotte, there's currently a $30 fee that comes off of your registration when you purchase, or excuse me, when you go through that process. But other fees or any additions may require additional legislative action moving forward. And this example gets us roughly around 2 billion. So I just wanted to highlight all of them together so we can see kind of orders of magnitude of dollar amounts that are possible and feasible given the examples. And as I mentioned, and I promised that I'd say it a few times, the nuance of this is that these numbers that we're talking about here, the 1%, 7%, 3%, et cetera, those can change based on however the law or potential change is written. And that is not the conversation that we want to get into as part of this entire effort, but it is always an interesting conversation that typically will come up every now and then. So as I mentioned, and as Kendall mentioned, we've actually been involved with the Beyond 77 task force group, the implementer group that was developed also as part of that effort. And then we met with a handful of individual stakeholders for initial conversations, just to understand not only what is happening locally, what's happening within other efforts, and to make sure that we had a holistic view of what was going on. So we wanted to highlight some of our methods. Typically what we were using was a live polling software during our meetings to actively understand, not only understanding of what these methods were, but preference for agency and constituencies and who they would be most interested to support. And then also the personal support of the individuals in the room. So in some cases, those could be different, and in some cases they were very aligned. And then sentiment worksheets as part of the implementer meetings. There were worksheets that were able to fill in, basically asking a preference very much in line with the question and example we have over on the side. So just to highlight some of the key takeaways, we basically have a top 3/4 that have come to the top. I do want to highlight that there is some difference, and this is again where I'll say nuance. The different groups did highlight a slightly different order that were of their preference. So vehicle registration fees were first. In second place, vehicle sales and regular sales tax were tied in the second place scoring. And then fuel sales tax came in at the end for our task force members. And then when we look at a slightly different group of folks, we have fuel sales tax that came towards the top, vehicle sales tax in the middle, and then vehicle registration fees, which has come in on third. In this case, our regular sales tax has fallen off. So at this stage, what I wanted to do is show you an example of what the FAST app actually looks like, and a brief tutorial. They're static images of how to use the tool. So this is what the first landing page will take you to, is page 1 of 2. You jump into it. Over in this top left corner, you're able to see the alternative funding source and the counties in North Carolina. And for each year, you'll notice there's a series of years there, the approximate revenue of any sources that you have selected. And each one of the boxes shows a slightly different metric. The bottom two on the right-hand side, they will actually show totals in slightly different fashions. The one allows you to break out by year, and the other is easier to break out counties for information. And then on the right-hand side, it's just a different way of showing effectively the same information, your total changes and your totals. So then, as I mentioned, here's your revenue by location and year. Jumping over your overall anticipated revenues. Jumping over here, there's actually two items I want to highlight. The map, which is interactive, you can click on and it will take you to that specific county and filter the results to those. And then also the filter button, which will bring up this screen. And this is where you can get down into the nitty gritty and really play with different numbers. In some cases, you can pick a county, you can pick multiple counties, you can pick different types of alternative funding, and then see what your numbers come up with. In some cases, I call it fun. I might just be an oddball and think that playing around with those is sometimes fun. So getting you back, in this example, I filtered to Mecklenburg County. Our map has displayed it, and you can see that our graphs have started to change. And then also our total has significantly changed to, it was at about a $15 billion-ish. So the second page is where you can really get into it and actually the dollar amount that you've identified into different projects, different transportation related projects. And so in the example that I've chosen, I have moved my sliders over back and forth to 50% sidewalk and then 50% multi-use path or greenway. As you go through, you can slide all the way around. And fortunately, for those of us that get a little carried away, on the top corner, it will tell you what percentage you are at. There's been many times I've played with this and actually been at 150% and realized that I was not as good at math as I should have been. It will let you know, and then you can kind of tweak your numbers to get a more reasonable amount. But for this example, the two that I've chosen, you can see that almost 8,000 miles of sidewalk on one side of the roadway, or almost 5,000 miles of multi-use path. So with all of that, I just wanted to highlight kind of where we are and where we're going. So we're working toward our final task force meeting, which is coming up in the very near future. I think it's right about 2 weeks from now. Still processing some of the feedback we've received. Then what we're going to do is continue this research moving forward and work on the identification of more nuanced, as I've said, benefit and costs related to those and possibilities of those 2 to 3 as we carry forward. And then, of course, as I alluded to in the beginning, the FAST app, we're actually working on an instruction manual to help users to utilize the tool a little bit more effectively and to be able to jump in as needed. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions as well.
Any questions? Go ahead, Bill.
What's the universe of projects that are being considered with all the different funding arrangements that were just laid out?
We have not identified specific projects. At this stage, it's just the identification of potential funding. Do you mean if the projects were to be bike ped oriented or roadway oriented, or?
Well, I'm saying there was all the strategies and recommendations coming out of the study, which were parallel in the 77 corridor, but then you're showing funding sources from 3 counties, one of which doesn't touch I-77.
Yes, so this, at our stage, we're carrying forward the work of the Beyond 77 study, which did include all of the counties listed there. We are not at the stage where we are picking who will participate in the overall sense, which counties, municipalities, et cetera. And we won't get it to the stage where specific projects or types of projects would be identified. Though that is a conversation piece that I think will be carried forward. And that's one of the tail end conversations. And as I've said, the nuance of it is that many of these either need to be implemented at the regional level or via local referendums. So if a local municipality or county decides not to participate in some, there is that option. Did I hopefully answer that for you?
Yeah, it's just the fact that the header is beyond 77 and then talking about the strategies, that's confusing.
Yeah, Bjorn, I can probably talk to you on the side about that. They didn't go that in depth about the study, but we can talk afterwards if you want.
I wanted to ask, like, how do you see us using this? Is this a tool that we're supposed to use to like educate our board and constituents and?
Yeah, there's actually, I don't want to limit you, so I would like you to use it however you would deem appropriate, but realistically, it would be a tool that could be utilized to educate not only the public, but members of elected officials, agency staff, things of that nature. I believe the original intent, and I was not the one that originally created the tool, the original intent was to make it so that when this conversation comes up, you have a framework in which to kind of set your foundation. You can say, well, if there is a 1% sales tax, or if there is a registration fee, what are the ballpark numbers that I could expect at my county or multiple counties if we were looking at a region. So mostly the tool is intended for information with the hope that it helps educate. Yeah.
In that vein, some of the caveats and nuances, are those identified if we're like clicking around, and do those pop up? Like, what would our ability to use that and be able to reference those limitations or
Let me go back.
nuances?
So the tool will limit you to effectively these filterable options. And to answer your question, this is as nuanced as you can get. And it will not say this is not legislatively allowed. It, as I kind of led the conversation with, it wasn't meant to limit, because the idea is that it's not legislatively allowed yet, or it's not locally allowed yet, because we didn't want to put any binders on the options that are possible.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I see you're asking for, you're showing like a spine down 3 counties, essentially, Iredell, Mecklenburg. But when you're coming to these revenue sources, you're showing a vast geographical area, starting all the way from Cleveland, going all the way to Rocky River, I believe. Now, what is the expectation from this body? Are you at the end of this process, are you going to be asking us to endorse it, approve this?
No, well, go ahead.
Well, yeah, the study was already adopted last January. Pretty much the use of the tool is just to show what's potentially can happen. The tool was made about 2 years ago, so it does need to be updated, and we are in the process of updating that. So yeah, the tool is just something to play around with at this moment. It's not supposed to be accurate or show. This is something to play around with. That's all I can pretty much say about it.
Just to jump back on, it is an informational tool. So at the end of the day, the ask is not that if something is in the tool that it means there is an actionable item that needs to be done from this efforts perspective.
No comments.
Go ahead.
I had a question about the 77 strategies that they're whittled down. Has there been any screening against, I don't know, Centra, Turnpike Authority, someone to say what is the upper limit of those strategies that could be done without affecting the viability of that as a toll project in the future?
Yeah, we can talk afterwards. You kind of lost me, not gonna lie.
Bjorn, are you asking like what projects could be done to widen roadways, or excuse me, in the vicinity of I-77 that wouldn't compromise the contract with Centric. My understanding and is if the project was already in the STIP, or maybe it was even in the MTP, Warren, I don't know if you remember the exact wording on that one. Then it could be allowed. I don't know if you want to.
Madam Chair. The paraphrasing of the contract references regarding unplanned revenue impacting facilities affect only things done to the interstate corridor.
Okay.
If it's outside, if it's not addressing an interstate caliber project, then the contract is silent on it.
Well, you said the corridor and then not the interstate.
Well, sorry, in the contract, they're the same thing. The what the contract identifies as an unplanned revenue impacting facility is anything that DOT does with controlled access lanes on I-77 that affects the performance of the express lanes. 21 is not covered by the contract. 115 is not covered by the contract. Catawba Avenue is not covered by the contract. Only controlled access interstate quality lanes on 77 or perhaps adjacent to it in one interpretation of it. So because the Beyond 77 study did not address the I-77 interstate itself, I don't see that there's anything in the Beyond I-77 study that would interfere with the contract.
Okay, that's good to know.
Thanks, Warren.
Yeah, thanks, Warren.
Any further questions or discussion? All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Oh, sorry, that was the questions for him. I have
Oh,
some
you
next
have
steps. for
more.
us.
Okay.
Yes. So lastly, we'll be having a final task force meeting later on this month. We will continue reviewing the 286 recommendations for consolidation or deletion, and we will continue working on the coalition. Lastly, I'd like to give a thank you to all of our task force members. You know who you are, except you, Andy, you're not special. And lastly, a thank you to the former project manager of Beyond 77, Augustine Rodriguez. This was his vision, and we would not be here without him. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Any questions for me?
Any further questions on next steps? All right, thank you. Next, we're going to have a CRTPO Transit Providers Work Group kickoff and next steps by Luke Lowry. Welcome.
Hey all, my name is Luke Lowry. I'm a regional planner with Central Atlanta Regional Council. I'm hoping to keep this a very brief update, but just wanted to share a little bit about the CRTPO Transit Providers Work Group. Perfect. So the CRTPO Transit Providers Work Group, you can see a little bit of the draft map that we have to the right, but really the purpose and mission of the group is to provide a means for the coordination and collaboration of public transportation planning within the CRTPO planning area. And also in line with that, to begin incorporating regional public transportation plans and programs such as the CTP, MTP, and TIP. As we all know, considerable cooperation is really required amongst transportation planning agencies to implement high quality public transportation services. And so the focus of this group is to help facilitate that within the CRTPO planning area. So again, pointing to this map on the right, which is just a draft map, and we'll talk a little bit more about membership in a little bit, but you can see outlined in red, that's the CRTPO planning area. So that's the focus. And within that, there's several transit providers such as CATS, ICATS, MTS, and UCT. But this group also incorporates other agencies, which maybe are part of the CRTPO planning area, but not exclusively within it. But I just wanted to also point to some of the background for this group. There's over the past couple of years been a lot going on behind the scenes that has led to the decision to have this group form. And the first is the CRTPO staffing and resources study. From that, there was really a recommendation for an increased focus on transit planning. And then in June 2020, the Transit Education Initiative Task Force was formed to really help lay the foundation for a shared understanding of federal funding for public transit, and to recommend an update to the formula for allocation of FTA Section 5307 funds. And then from that, there was the development of a Section 5307 Memorandum of Understanding that was developed and agreed to by transit providers within the CRTPO planning area. And just through that work, the development of the MOU, it was made clear by everyone who participated in that there is value in having a working group to have these kinds of discussions more routinely. So CRTPO staff conducted surveys during summer of 2021 and fall of 2022 to gather a greater understanding of some of the topics that might be addressed by a working group, who the participants would be and what the priorities would be. And so that kind of leads us up to the decision to form this group. And Central Iowa Regional Council is helping facilitate the start of this group. And so we, as the beginning of that, also did some one-on-one discussions with the agencies who were involved, and that has led us to where we are now. And I'll talk a little bit more. We had a kickoff meeting, and that's really been our first major step. But with this group, a major component of this initial stage is the development of a draft charter. We really want this group to be clear on what the intent and purpose is. So within that draft charter, we've outlined some of the goals that I'll just briefly share now. And the first one is really to enhance collaboration. And as I said, to really serve as a forum for collaboration amongst the CRTPO planning area, public transportation providers. There's also some goals around funding sources, and specifically to provide support for Section 5303 funds to maximize utilization. So, things like guidance and applications and call for projects, and also to provide support for Section 5307 funds to maximize utilization. Another goal is to assist with performance-based planning and programming activities. And then finally, a goal is to improve transit planning education. In terms of membership, kind of the blanket requirement for membership that we have is all agencies that administer or receive Section 5303 or 5307 funding within the CRTPO planning area. So this includes a staff level representative from each transit entity within the planning area, including CATS, UCT, MTS, and ICATS. But there are also other agencies that either administer or receive. So membership also includes Central Iowa Regional Council, where recipients of 5303 funding, NCDOT Integrated Mobility Division, the Metro Iowa Regional Travel Demand Model Team, and CRTPO representatives. In addition, we're also going to be including subject matter experts who have background and knowledge about federal and state transportation funding mechanisms and other topics that will be of discussion in this group. And this charter is still in development. I'll just, we're going to talk about the kickoff meeting a little bit, but in that first meeting, we shared the draft charter with all the invited members, and it's going to be kind of a living document as we're getting this group off the ground. So this is the direction we're going, but we're still kind of working through some of these questions around membership and logistics. So right now, Central Iowa is facilitating for the first 6 months of this work group. And after that time, CRTPO will become the full-time administrator for the group. And right now we're planning on having monthly meetings during the 6-month stretch, but the goal is after it's been established to likely switch to quarterly meetings. So you can see some lovely photos here from our kickoff meeting. I think we got both the Alexes in the room in the photos here. But the kickoff meeting was held on September 12th at our offices at Central Iowa. And this was the first official meeting for the transit providers work group. And some of the main topics that we covered were the background and context for the group, which I went over a little bit here, and just kind of reconfirming with folks some of the issues and opportunities that they had seen that led to this decision to form the group. Also, as I said, we shared the draft charter and got feedback on it from members. And we also spent some time asking questions about curriculum ideas. We really want this group to be member-led for the topics and agendas to be of value. So we are developing curriculum currently for future meetings, but really trying to get participation and input from folks on what kinds of trainings, education, and other material they would like to be part of these meetings. So in terms of next steps, our next meeting is going to be this month on October 17th at Central Lina's offices. During this stretch where Central Lina is facilitating the group, we're going to have 3 more monthly meetings. The specific dates are still to be determined, but they're going to be in November and December of this year and January of next year. So that's really the high-level overview. Does anybody have any questions?
Any more questions? Nope. All right.
Ready?
You got off easy. Thank you for bringing us an update on that information.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, last but not least, we're going to hear from Miss Loretta Barron, who's going to provide a CRTPO Federal Certification Review Report. Thank you, Loretta.
Thank you. And I don't have a presentation or chocolate. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. I do thank you for allowing me to present basically the results of this federal certification review we conducted in June with your staff as well as the chair of the MPO board. I do want to start off first by thanking your staff and your team for working with us on the review. It was conducted about a year and a half early. We were in an effort trying to spread out some of the reviews that we were doing around the state. We have 9 MPOs and we had about 5 that were in 1 year. And it was kind of crunch time for us. So we moved all of them. And so I do want to thank Bob and Neil for helping to organize the review, Judy for doing public outreach for us, because we always typically have a public meeting or some opportunity to involve the public in the review process. And then as well as the rest of the team, I think it was an all hands on effort. I think all the team participated in the review, and I do appreciate all their efforts in helping us accomplish that. We completed the review in June, issued the report the end of July, I believe. And you all are certified for an additional 4 years from this year. As part of the review, we included 3 recommendations for CRTPO. One of those recommendations was to complete or advance work on the congestion management process, which we also know is currently underway by Kendall, and our staff is working with CRTPO on implementing and completing the CMP. And so that is something we will do with all of our recommendations. There was also one to consider better addressing resiliency and stormwater in the MTP process. We know that based on the MTP, there are some high flood areas in the MPO area. So we just want to work with the MPO to better improve that information in the MTP, as well as to look at tourism. I know when you live here, you don't really think of yourself as a tourist attraction, but you all do generate a lot of tourism, and we just kind of suggested that the MPO maybe work with the chamber or maybe some of your downtown tourism groups to just better address that in the CMP. It is one of our focus areas from the Federal Highway Administration. And lastly, you had one commendation on your EJ process. Do want to thank the team for conducting the EJ analysis as well as doing EJ outreach. It is something we struggle with across the state in getting MPOs to adequately do the analysis and to conduct adequate outreach to those EJ communities. We know it's hard to get them to participate all the time, but for us, it's also documenting what you do, because we like to say, if you don't document it, I don't know that you did it. So documenting those efforts is definitely key to the planning process. And I think that was all of our outcomes that came out of the review. Like I said, I just want to thank your staff, your board for participating and allowing us to do it early. And if you all have any questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Thank you, Loretta. Any questions? Awesome. Thank you. Okay, moving into our other reports. As always, you have a Division 10 and Division 12 construction update that was included in your packet. So I'll pause for a minute. I don't know if Sean or Anil might have any additional updates in addition to that. Thank you. Next we have Alex. Do you have an update for us?
I'll be brief. First thing I wanted to announce is that our director, Ryan Brumfield, has taken another position at NCDOT, so he will be departing from Integrated Mobility Division. He's moving on to the Office of Strategic Initiatives and Program Support, whatever that is. We do have an interim in the meanwhile, Brendan Fuquay, who is the branch manager for our program and project management team. So we will hopefully will have uninterrupted support moving forward for our transit agencies and for those that are working with us on a variety of different projects. I received yesterday a an on-demand microtransit annual report that will be posted on our website. This is something that is intended to be updated annually. I went ahead and sent that to Curtis while I was on the train this morning, and so he will be able to send that out to you all for review if your communities are interested. I know I've talked an awful lot about that at this committee about that, but that's something we continue to support various efforts throughout the state. So if your transit agency is at all interested, they can certainly reach out to us. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that this past week, we submitted 2 grants for the Reconnecting Community and Neighborhood Access and Equity kind of joint grant. Those were 2 separate grants in the last year, but they've combined them for this. It's just recently closed. So IMD actually submitted 2 applications for that. One is for mobility hubs in the S-line area, which I've mentioned before, which is nowhere near here. It's the line that's being proposed to connect Richmond to Raleigh and through a number of smaller communities. So we did some TOD work for many of the cities along that line and are now looking at mobility hub planning and then implementation, which is what we applied for. And another one, which I didn't get many details on, but we also applied for building of a variety of different state trails across the state as well. So in total, that was about $200 million worth of grant applications that we submitted last week. And I say this less to as an information item and more as a kind of commitment from us that we are interested in assisting communities. May it be through a kind of joint application throughout the state or through individual consultation regarding federal, a variety of federal applications and grants that are offered. And so that may be something that the MPO may also be offering shortly. But that I wanted to make sure that you all are aware that we are also available too. So if you're interested in going for something big or small, that our office and our staff are willing to help out with that. So those are my updates for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Next, we'll hear from Jennifer. You have an update for us on craft? Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't usually give the craft updates. Bob and Neil were not available, and so you'll quickly wonder why the discretionary funded girl is doing the update. I volunteered, not thinking it through, that I would have to be up here giving a summary of the meeting. So last Tuesday, September 26th, CRTPO hosted the craft meeting. There were 4 updates that might pertain to the TCC. Martin Kinnaman gave an update on the Metrolina regional model. They are underway with a household survey, approximately 5,000 surveys in the region, and it will run through November. They are in the process of collecting data for regional population and employment control totals. That information will come back to you either later this month or when it's available. I believe Curtis will give an update on that. Coordinate Our Future. Thankfully, Reagan was here and I don't have to cover that land use allocation process because, again, out of my box. MTP updates. So CRAF is an organization of 4 of the MPOs in the area and 1 rural RPO, Rocky River, and everyone is working on their MTP, including us. We are working with Kimberly Horn to revise this. We're revising a scope right now and hope to be under contract with them by the end of the year, if not early the following year, for the 2055 MTP. And finally, Jason. Well, no, I got 2 more. Jason Wager gave a Connect Beyond initiative update. And you will hear more about that from him. Luke Lowry gave an update on connected and autonomous vehicle CAVs. The task force, there was a task force that sounded like it was pretty active before the pandemic hit, and it's resumed now, and that initiative will tie into other initiatives we have going, like the Metrolina Regional ITS Plan, Connect Beyond, CASI, and Beyond 77. That next meeting is the early November. The next craft meeting is November 28th. Any questions? Thank you. All right. Now I feel a little more comfortable up here. So the fall call, do we have the next schedule? Yeah, nice. The fall call is open. I've heard from most of you here. The mandatory pre-submittal meetings are due by next Friday. If you want to submit and you haven't scheduled that meeting yet, please do so. The call will close on October 31st, but we do need that pre-submittal meeting by the 13th. The POC will meet next week for a very short meeting just to help guide staff on some application questions. And finally, on September 18th, Neil Burke emailed you a survey request. NCDOT has a survey asking questions for people who have run discretionary funded projects in their area. And it's a pretty detailed question. It's about training for using federal funds. How could the MPO help? How can they help? It's your opportunity to answer some questions about the portal and you're fun with that. So I hope you can find 10 minutes really. And if as you're taking the survey, you're thinking of things that CRTPO can help with, please both put it in the survey, but also feel free to reach out to Bob and Neil at any time. If there's things that we can do to help support you, we definitely want to do that, which leads into very follow-up with thanking Neil and Bob for reclassifying me to project manager. And I work closely with all of you. I would say daily, I get emails from either you or somebody in your agency, definitely NCDOT, and I just thoroughly enjoy working with all of you. And I hope to continue to do so. I love working with the PSC and Andrew, and everybody's been great. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you, Jennifer. Now we'll hear from Curtis.
Yeah, for Biped Work Group, we are going to meet this afternoon to begin the discussion on our focus area reps for next year. So we'll talk about that a little bit and select that slate at a later meeting, and then have a slate for your approval, TCC approval in January. We'll also have a couple other items to talk about this afternoon. But that's it.
All right, thank you, Curtis. I'll ask any additional upcoming issues that we need to update the group on. I don't believe so. With that, I'll thank Curtis for being with me this month, and congratulations, I guess, to Travis. I have not heard, but I believe he is out becoming a new father. So
We do have a couple of other kind of upcoming items to go through.
that was what I was asking.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes, now's your turn.
That's fine. Okay. It's upcoming items. First of all, I do want to acknowledge our face that's not in the room has been replaced. That's David McDonald, who's been with TCC for a while, representing MTC. So Brian has switched out with him. I just want to acknowledge David's years of service. I said that we should have cookies to celebrate it. There was a debate about chocolate chip or oatmeal raisin, so the whole thing got called off. But welcome to Brian. We're glad to have you, and bye to David, even though he's not here in the room. We do have some action items looking at next month. We're going to talk about, Andy's going to bring back functional classification amendments. And then we have the 2024 TCC schedule, which will be on consent. We do have our FY 2023 annual report, which Judy's prepared. There's a copy, each should have a copy of that. I think you've had them at your chairs. Please review those for recap of all that we've accomplished this year. Thank you for your support with all that work, and feel free to send any comments on that to myself or Judy. And there are also some extras at the front table on the way out if you want to grab some. Also next year, our 2024 CRTPO orientation. We'll hold our biennial orientation for new and existing board members in early January 2024. That orientation provides an opportunity for members to learn about their roles and responsibilities, including the TCC as well. So please be on the lookout for additional information from Judy Dillard to save the date for that. And that's all I've got.
All right, thank you. Any questions? That was a lot of updates. All right, thank you all. As always, thank you for your time and participation in the important work that we do in planning for transportation in the region. And with that, we have covered all items on our agenda, so we are adjourned.
Okay.